Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of What's New in History. I'm here with special guests from the Nubian studio. I have Blue, who's probably one of the coolest guys I've ever seen in my life. They are from the Nubian studio. They are Nubians who are going to tell us about their project, and we're going to have a discussion and see where it goes from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernie. It's a pleasure to be here with you on an episode of What's New in History. My name is Blue, just like I introduced me, and we're a Nubian podcast wherein we put the light back on the forgotten history, culture, and achievements of the Nubian people. So join us, tune in, and let's explore their culture and how they were doing back in the days.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, sir.
So tell us about your project, the Nubian Studios. What is this exactly?
So the Nubian Studio, we are a bunch of Nubians who gathered together. We thought that the history of the Nubian and the Nubians themselves were quite forgotten and no one speaks about them. The culture is like it's about to be wiped and erased. No one knows Nubia, no one knows the Nubian art, the Nubian dances, the Nubian music, basically the Nubian culture is no longer there and it's just kind of forgotten. So what we do is we decided to put the light back on it, to put the focus back on it, and also to show people about it. Because I myself am from Nubia. I know some things about Nubia, but I meet some Nubian people who know nothing about it. So it's like,
okay,
the new generation, the new youth don't know what their history was, even though they're Nubians. So we're just trying to put the light back on this thing and then show their achievements, their history, their culture, what did they do, how did they live, so on and so forth.
Oh, I think that's great. So what is the geography of like Nubia? So are you not in Nubia right now? What would be considered Nubia today? Like where would the geography be where Nubians are from?
Nubians are generally in the River Nile area, 2-3 kilometers in the River Nile area. And back in the day, their exact location used to be in the south of Egypt and the north of Sudan. So this area, the south of Egypt, specifically Aswan, and in the north of Sudan, the top of Sudan, the north, this is exactly where the Nubians was. And the Nubians have located in this area around the River Nile, but they had some different activities based on where they were located exactly. So Nubia itself was big, it was huge. However, there was different activities. So basically what it was is there was about 6 cataracts, and then these cataracts are where the Nubians gathered and joined, and then each cataract is like they have their own practices and activities, but at the end it's one core culture among all of them.
I understand. So just for all lay people, especially Americans, we don't always know. A cataract there's basically like rapids, right? That's where you can't get through the river. There's rocks and rapids, that kind of thing. That's what the cataract is, right?
Yeah, it's like there is water canals and waterfalls, and this what makes the cataract. Right. And then that's an area of water. So there will be water, quite some animals and things. There's like life there. Unlike other areas, because that was way, way, way back. There was no like water tubes and water canals and all these things. So people gathered where the water is.
Right.
So Nubia was so big, and then it was just groups. But it was one core culture among all these groups in these areas.
God. And now way back, like before, when Nubia was, the Nubian people came about, were founded, they weren't really called Nubians, right? Would this be like the land of Kush? Is that correct?
Yes. It was called the land of Kush, or the kingdom of Kush.
The kingdom of Kush, which is south of Egypt. It's sort of like a go between the rest of Africa and Egypt. I believe it was like a big trading center. Is that right?
It is. It was a trading center. So basically, Sudan is located in the northern and the eastern part. The top of Sudan, which is towards the northern part, was a connection to Egypt itself. And the Nubia land itself is a land that was shared between Sudan and Egypt. So the top of Sudan and then the south of Egypt. So this land was the Nubian land before even it was divided that this is Sudan and then this is Egypt and all this. This was the land of Nuba. And then when the separation happened, there was Nubians that were part of Egypt, and then there were Nubians that are part of Sudan.
Okay.
Yes. So if you go to the North Sudan and you go to the South Egypt, you'll see people are the same. They have the same music. They have the same taste. They have the same things. Unlike when you go way South Sudan and then you go way North Egypt, you see people are quite different. But the area where they're together and then they meet people there are the same.
Okay.
So yeah, in that area, people just have had their things and life happened there.
So today there's a Nubian people that live across two different countries. Yeah, if you were
Yes,
going to
sir.
be in the country, so it's South Egypt and Northern Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an ancient culture, like probably even when Egypt started, I think the Nubians were there,
We're
right?
there.
I think we're talking like 2000, 3000 BC times.
Yes, around the 2000s, mostly.
And then we know in our podcast, we covered the 25th dynasty, which was, I know there was some exciting stuff in there. It was Taharqa. That would be around the late 600s BC. I don't know if you guys ever get into that far back when you're thinking of things, but I'm sure that, you're people that are, so basically like the Nubian people, why you want to tell them about their history? Is there like a diaspora, or you guys live all over the world? Is that it?
Okay, so the Nubian people themselves, they have traveled all over the world and then they have emerged into different cultures and so on. Earlier, you mentioned that it was being a trade center.
Mm-hmm.
So the trade center was mostly on the northern part of Nuba, because the northern part of Nuba, usually what they did was they did agriculture, because they had more water, the land was full of agriculture, so they have created excellent farmers and people there were just all about agricultures, and then they became the bread basket. When you go to the south of the Nuba, the further south you go, people are more of a metal people. They had more metal, they had more gold, so they were always digging in, getting that gold, that metal, those metals, all of them. But these metals needed to be exported to other areas and to go to other areas, and this is why the northern part of Nuba became the trade center.
Okay.
And since it was a trade center, a lot of cultures came in, and there was this borrowing of words from here, words from there, cultures from here, cultures from there. Marriages happened, things happened, and then the people got mixed. And then the separation of countries happened, and people just started traveling here, traveling there. So you see me, I'm Nubian, but right now I'm in the northern part of Egypt. This is not really a part of Nuba.
Okay.
Yeah, and they just are all over the world right now. Most of them don't really know about the history, because some of them are even born outside. So we're just trying to put the light and shine, put the light back on all these things and this history and who we are.
That's excellent. I mean, there's a lot of history. Like you say, we started back in 3000 BC, and then you were there was a Nubia. Was it called Nubia during Roman times? Is that where it got the name? I think I read that.
Yes, that's true.
So wasn't there? I think I remember we were learning about there was a Nubian queen that defeated a Roman army at some point. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, definitely. There was a queen. I believe her name was pronounced as Amanirenas. I'm not sure exactly that's how it's pronounced, but that was the name. And she actually won a war against the Roman Empire with only 30,000 Nubian soldiers. And the Nubian soldiers basically were armed with swords, bows, and arrows. And they had to fight the Romans actually in Egypt. She led her army from the front with her son by her side. And her surprise attack was highly successful, that she captured the major Roman cities.
Wow. Not a lot of people beat the Romans, so that's pretty good for her, especially the queen. That's a pretty interesting story. I think all your people should know about that one, for sure. Even though it's
100%,
way back.
100%.
I was going to say, I believe the Egyptians also employed a lot of Nubians in their army as mercenaries, and they were good bowmen back in the ancient days.
Yes, 100%. And when it comes to this, I myself know that this was very, very recent here in Egypt. Egypt had a war with Israel, and during these times they hired Nubians, because the Nubian language itself is not really understood amongst other people. So they used it to send messages and codes and stuff during the war. So even if the connection was interrupted, or there was someone that is listening to them or so, who wouldn't really understand what's going on, and then that gave them an advantage. So the war team have always been part of the Nubians. They were good with bombs. They just have their own language. And this also shows you how forgotten it is that no one really knows their language.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is the language still spoken today?
It's still spoken today in some parts. So when you go to the part where the Nubians, exactly where you see the language. However, for example, I myself, I don't speak the Nubian language.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know it's spoken. I've seen it being spoken in some places. And from my own experience, how I've seen it, it's like English. There's British English, and then there's American English, there's Australian English, but it's one core language, which is English. So this is like there's one core Nubian language, but then when you go to these people here, for example, the ones in Egypt, they will have few different words a
Okay.
quite different way of saying some things. And then when you go to the ones in Sudan, they have a few different words, a quite different way of saying some things, but it's one language. They both understand each other.
Okay. You mentioned before that was there some kind of a split in the more in the present day where that the Nubians were displaced, or some ended up in Egypt and some ended up in Sudan. Was there a time like a modern event that caused that?
It's not a modern event. It's a history event. It happens when the people from Turkey mixed up with the people from the UK, and there was this whole invasion on Africa. So this is when it happened. So they came in together. They invaded Egypt, starting with the northern part of Egypt, going to the south, and then from there they also invaded Sudan, and then they separated a country into two. So they said, "Oh, this is the line, here is Sudan, and then here is Egypt." And this is what separated the people of Nubia, because the land was a common land between both, and there was no borders there. So you can go and come freely. There's no borders, there's nothing. This is just Nubian people here, Nubian people there. It was just normal. But when the invasion happened, it was two countries now. This is the border of Sudan, this is the border of Egypt. To go from here, you need this, and to go from here, you need these documents, and you need these stuff, and you need to go through this. But before, it was just one land.
And when did this happen? Isn't this relatively recently? Is it 100 years ago, 200 years ago?
Yeah, this happened in the 1900s. So this is not like BC time. Yeah, 1900s.
Okay. So they were displaced from their ancestral lands, and then wasn't the dam built? Wasn't there a dam built too around that time? The Answan Dam?
Yeah, there was a dam. It's called the High Dam.
Okay.
And this dam was built on Egypt. As a result of this dam being built, there was floodings, so on and so forth. And these floodings covered some part of the Nubia. And to be specific, it covered the land of Kosh itself, the kingdom of Kosh, where there was a land. So this dam covered it and raised some people there. So people had to migrate as well and go to different places.
I see.
Because of the dam. Yes, sir.
I see. So that must have been hard. I guess that's probably where the problem started, where everybody had kind of moved away and we started to lose their history.
Exactly. That's spot on, man. Spot on. Right there.
I see. So now 150 almost years later, 120 years later, the people are still around. They're living in other places. It's amazing that about human beings, though. We do, I sometimes say, well, we probably all came from Nubia at one time. We all came from Africa. And then we all left.
Yes, sir.
And we all went everywhere else. And we all changed our language. And, and that's how we all
might be
were
Nubian.
about.
We never know.
We probably are. I know we all came out of Africa somewhere, right?
True.
We must have came through there at some point. It is just the way we are.
We always adapt to wherever we are, and then we just take it from there. We start a new life here or there based on what we have. And that's how life has been.
I think so. I think it's great. I mean, I think that's how humans are. We mix in other places and we make our new places home. There's I always think of this. There's an expression the Greeks said, you can't step in the same river twice. It's like 20 years later, cultures are different. Things are going to change. We definitely don't want to lose our history, but we don't necessarily always need to hold on to them so tightly that we end up having, ancient grudges against each other and that kind of thing either, right?
Definitely. We're always evolving. We're always moving forward. We don't let the history hold us back. However, we learn about it, because I myself think a person is who his history is. So if you know your history, you know who you are and you know where you come from.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you forget it and you forget your values, where you are, your culture, who you are, then you become a completely new person who wasn't there before. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're putting the light on, for the people to know who they are, what their culture was, what they used to be, but not to hold them back. It's just to learn, because we will keep evolving, because times are different. Times are not the same.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's true. As you say it, I find it difficult, like in my own self, being an American, and my ancestry is Italian and Polish. And I obviously don't speak any Italian or Polish. I'm learning to speak Spanish, which I have no connection to. So I know Italian history and I know Polish history some, but mostly I know American history, and I consider myself an American, even though ethnically, I guess there really is no such a thing as an ethnic American anyway. But we're all mixed up here, But we all do kind of know our history. We have where I live, we're a melting pot. My family came here. I think I'm fourth generation. My great grandfathers were born overseas in another country. So I have three: my grandparents, my parents, and my. So yeah, we've none of us speak Italian or Polish.
Because you were born and then you were raised in the US, you grew up on the English, the English culture. So I think you can identify yourself as American, But
Right.
if we go back to where you come from, actually, then you come from the land of Italy, like you said. You guys came from Italy, right?
Yeah, my mother's side. My mother's side is Italy. My father's side is Poland.
Oh, wow. So
Right.
yeah, where you grow up, and you are what your surrounding is. So I believe if you grow up in America, you learn the American, you know the American culture. That what makes Bernie Bernie, if I
Right.
may say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
personally,
sir.
I think that happened all throughout history. Like, I think Nubia was that way in 3000 BC. There was probably new people moving in and they became
Yes.
Nubians, just like we became Americans, you know?
Yes, 100%. And people were moving in because it was a trade center. There was gold, there was metal, there was all these things. The north was the breadbasket, so it was a major trade center between the south to move the gold and everything. It was the
Yeah.
breadbasket to feed all the people, all the surrounding areas. And even recently, more people have came in with this invasion that was by the United Kingdom and people from Turkey. This invasion also brought new people in and actually caused major moves there because when they have came in, they had more technology, they had more this and more that. So they saw what they can use there and what they can get out from there. They started getting things out. For example, they started digging out for gold and all this. Also, they've started growing. I remember they started growing cotton when they had the biggest cotton project all
Okay.
over the world. Yes,
Mhm.
and then they were exporting it to the UK, wherein they made clothing there, and then they exported it everywhere else. So this right here, for this to happen, some people from the UK must have been sitting there, and then some people from Turkey must have been sitting there. And these people, in a couple of generations' time, these people actually belong back to Turkey and to the United Kingdom. But nowadays, the new kids, they will think, oh, we're from here, we were born here, we were raised here, this is
Right.
who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it happens with humans.
Yes, sir.
We just did an episode. I'm the worst pronouncer. I think it's called Bereniki. I always forget. I'm terrible. But there's a big excavation, and it's in the south of Egypt. So I have a feeling it's Nubian territory. It was an ancient port because I do believe it was part of Kush. And it's they've found amazing things there. It's just like what you said about mixing, because it was a port where ships came in from India and people and from Arabia, and so people have ended up living there. So they found Buddhas and they found Sanskrit writing, and it's an amazing city. I should look it up. I can't pronounce it correctly. I believe it's called Berenike, Brenike. And it's the same kind of thing. After a couple generations, you could have been from India or Nubia or wherever, and then your mother was one and your father was something else, and then you're all mixed together and becomes a new culture.
100%.
Yeah.
And
So what are
100%.
some other, yeah. So
Go ahead.
what are some things you want to tell your your people that are not living in Nubia? What some other things maybe you want to talk about? Well, for sure, that's what we're doing here. You guys have a website, right? And what up? Do you do other kind of
Yes.
events? Do you do events like Zoom events to get everybody together or stuff like that, or even just events physically? If not, that might be a good idea.
Definitely. I just heard this from you at this Zoom event, because especially that's going to bring everyone from all the areas. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be physically here or there. You can just hop in, join, talk, and learn. And I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in knowing about the Nubians, especially Nubians themselves and other people. So yeah, definitely that's a good idea. We're just starting as well. We'll be glad to have that on. Definitely. We should invite
there
you
you
as
go.
well. We're going to invite you to our next Zoom meeting.
I will definitely
100%.
come to that. I will definitely come to check that out. I'll be a non-Nubian, but I'll be all right. I'll just be the Polish-Italian guy from the United States. Yeah, for sure.
We're glad to have you.
Well, that would be good. I guess, I have a couple other questions I wrote down. So what are some things that, as the Nubian society is doing to like become more into the modern world? I imagine, it's a traditional culture and there may be a lot of old type things that sort of, it's changing. There's a lot of cultures are like that today. What's kind of like happening with Nubians in that vein?
Yeah, sure. When I look at it, I believe what's happening what's with the Nubians is, or from my own point of view and perspective, what I've seen around is that back in the day, Nubians, especially women in the Nubian area, they were put home. They weren't really allowed them to get education or pursue careers, so on and so forth. And to keep up with the day as they have evolved, as things have changed. Women right now are empowered. They can go pursue their education. Women right now can have careers, do this, do that. On the other hand, back in the day, women were just, you're a stay-at-home wife. You need to learn how to cook, clean, and then you're just home until you move in with your husband. And also when it comes to the marriage itself, the people there where you cannot marry outside the Nubian people. So basically you're limited to marrying within your own family or within the Nubian culture, even if it's not your family. It was preferred that it's from your family. For example, your cousin, your fourth cousin, end of the day, that's your cousin. But not, for example, if you're in the first cataract, it was better to marry from the first cataract and not to go all the way to the fifth one or the sixth one. But you can go there. But outside, it's completely not allowed. And in some areas, actually, I've heard that if you actually marry from outside, then it's like you're displaced. You can no longer come back to the Nubian people. You stay outside where you married. So you're no longer welcome back in if you married from outside. And that was your choice. But these things have definitely, they're no longer there anymore. And things have just evolved. Well, I'm glad that we evolved. Because right now I can look out a variety of
now you have the world at your feet. A cool guy like you got anything you want now. I'll tell you though, that's really good though, because there's a lot of society, cultures today that are still that way, not naming them and not knowing them, but they still are. And that's pretty open. And, I think as a lot of, Americans that are listening and English speaking people, would think that that's somewhat backward how it used to be. But we were that way too. I mean, in America, women didn't have the right to vote till the 1920s and it's only 2024. So that's only 5 generations, and we weren't displaced or anything. So, a culture that was displaced, a very old culture that has a lot of, traditional ways, obviously had to adapt to survive. Right. And that's kind of what you guys are doing now by creating this project so that you could, maintain your culture. And especially if you're going to be marrying outside the culture and people are going to, I think it's great, though, that people mix and marry. I think I understand the reason for keeping things so you keep continuity. But I also think that people should love who they love. Right.
100%. I agree with you on that 100%. And I'm definitely with this mix. And yeah, man, people evolve. I think we should evolve as well. Or just upon evolving, and when we're evolving, we should not erase who we were or forget who we was. And that's just my take on this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's great. I don't know. I really don't have anything else to add. If you guys want to add anything else, I mean, I feel that it's really interesting, the Nubian history. I think that I'm more of a history nerd than maybe you guys are. So I'm in the way back in history, and I don't know tons about Kush and Nubia. I did, and I forgot. Like I said, I would urge your listeners, your people, if they want to know about ancient history and Nubia, look up Taharqa. I believe there was going to be a movie with Will Smith. Taharqa was supposed to be played by Will Smith. And there's people who believe that Taharqa saved the world, like saved Judaism and thus Christianity and Islam, because in the 690s, there was an invasion from the Assyrians, invaded Jerusalem, and that was during the 25th dynasty when Taharqa was in charge of Egypt, when the Nubians had Egypt, and a Nubian Egyptian army went to intercept the Assyrians, and there was a battle, and whether or not who won or not, it probably distracted them and weakened them enough that Jerusalem was not sacked and destroyed. And if it had been at that time, because there was no northern kingdom of Israel, there would probably be no Judaism at all, because that would have wiped it out. And then thus there would be no Christianity and no Islam, because it would have wiped out the monotheistic religion at the time.
Wow. That's
now the story in the Bible. Look that up. The story in the Bible is that the angel of death came out and killed all the Assyrian soldiers. But I'm kind of dubious about that story. But actually, the story that comes from Egypt, which is interesting, the Egyptians told the story that their god, I forget the god's name was, when the Assyrians were all sleeping, he sent out mice. And all the mice went and ate all their bowstrings and the thongs for their shields. And so when they woke up, all their stuff was eaten, and they couldn't have a battle. They couldn't take the city, so they all left. And there used to be a statue in Egypt with the god holding the mouse, and that represented that how they saved Egypt. I'm sorry, they saved Jerusalem from the Assyrians.
Yeah, I think the gods you're talking about are probably the pharaohs.
Yes, but there was a god. There was a god. The pharaohs. There was a god, one of the Egyptian gods. I forget which one he was, but he had mice, and he sent the mice out to to get them.
It's
And
on the
also,
by side
Taharka
and
has an
just in the
amazing
water also.
grave.
Uh-huh.
Taharka's grave, now it's different because of where the planet has changed in 2,000 years, where the sun shines and how it moves. But it used to be at the certain time of the year, I think like the solstice, the sun would shine on Taharka's grave, and it would shine on gold, and it would represent the resurrection, because the Egyptian gods have
Wow.
this resurrection, death and resurrection cycle. So it's still there. You could look it up. It's one of the mountains. I think it's Abu Jebel, around that area. And Taharka's
I think
grave
I've
was
watched
there.
a movie, something like this, where the light shines and then it's just all gold and everything, and then
Right.
you're going deep and you see all this
Right,
stuff.
right.
Definitely see that. It would definitely be interesting to check the Harkov. I do have a question though.
Sure.
Since you said you're into history and all of this, I believe that there is some pyramids in the US, right? You guys have some pyramids there too.
I don't think so. Maybe
I'm
there's
not-
some mounds.
if I'm
There's
not
some
mistaken.
mounds. There's some. Oh, in the Americas, yes. In
Yeah.
Mexico and in Belize, yes. Not in North America, but in Central America, absolutely there are.
In Central America.
Yes.
And I wonder can these actually be linked to the pyramids that are in Egypt and then the pyramids that are in Sudan? Is there any link? Have these people actually went all the way from here to there, or these people came from here to there, or what do you think of this? If you
I'll
have
tell
an
you what
idea
I think,
about
and
it.
it's in a logical sense. If you were an ancient person and you had whatever it's the best technology you could have, and you wanted to build something, start at the ground and go really, really high, right? You would just stack a bunch of bricks up on top of each other, or would just start with a square and then slowly get up to the top. So basically, pyramids is just human ingenuity. It's like the way it has to be done. Like if you want to build a wheel, it has to be round. You can't make a square wheel, right?
Yes.
Certain things
100%.
just are, right? Like if you want to build a dam, you block the water. I mean, just any.
As
So if you
simple
want
as
to
that.
go high, you have to
You
start
just go
wide
high
and go
and
skinny.
then yes, that's how towers are all the time. You have to be
Right.
wide and then go skinny.
Right. So that's basically just a building construction. So that's the way the Native Americans did it, and that's the way they did it there. And they pretty much just how it was. I think that. And there could be something way back in our culture, like way back, because we have to even realize that the Native Americans also came from Africa. Everybody came from Africa at some time. And
that's the motherland.
Right. And it could have been a very small amount of people, because there was only a small amount of people that survived, that came out, because we, at a certain point in most of human culture, was almost died out. So we're a very small family that came out, So, and then we all became different from there. You and I look as different as you're so much cooler looking to me. I could never.
Nah, man.
I'm kidding, bro. I'm just saying. We all look different, but we all came from a place. And so I think we
100%.
all just have the same way if we want to build something high. So I don't think there's anything in I think they're exciting stories where people think that people came from Africa and went across the ocean, but that's a pretty big ocean. And the ships needed to,
Ships needed fuel. They need food while they were on the water to get all the way there to survive. So where would they get food in the middle of the water from?
Not very easily. Now, we do know the Polynesians, they did cross the Pacific over centuries, and they were very good sailors, and they brought chickens with them, and they brought potatoes and sweet potatoes and things, but they knew the currents, and they would go from island to island. And that took, generations of generations and generations. So if they, maybe knew how to build a pyramid, they may have forgotten by the time they got there. So my opinion is, yes, that the pyramids were just the way to grow something high. A lot, just like agriculture. Agriculture developed independently in many parts of the world because a human being could see a seed growing and say, well, instead of me waiting for that to grow, maybe I could pick that seed and put it where I want it. And they just kind of figured it out.
Yes, 100%. I feel you on this.
Yeah.
This logical take, I've actually never thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense that pyramids are just, you go big and then you go small, you build it. You build it as high as you can.
Right.
I agree with you on that one.
Right. It's human beings are very they figure stuff out, and we have to figure stuff out, and we do. And that's what I wanted to say, is that's why it makes me sometimes angry and annoyed when people think aliens or advanced civilizations taught everybody how to do things, when it's really smart human beings like you and me, learn how to do it. I mean, you're in Egypt and I'm in Pennsylvania, and we're able to do this, and no aliens invented this program that we're using. Us human beings did it. And here we are. We're going to spread our word over the airways, just like somebody from 3000 BC wanted to learn something else, and he got out of whatever he got on. Maybe they didn't even have camels then. He got on a boat or something, and he went somewhere else, and he learned other things. And I just think that's how we are, and hopefully we'll survive that way.
Hopefully, and we will keep on surviving and evolving. And I think it's just been generations taking what the generation earlier than them did and then just taking it further. That's how it have always been. For example, the airplanes and stuff. Someone goes as far as he can, and then the rest picks up on the research that he did, and then he goes further until we have airplanes, until we have internet, until we have better phones. For example, recently, if you just speak about our dads, just that's quite recent. The phones were back what they hold on their back to something like this right now, when it's just a really small thing that can do way more. If you look at PCs, probably you have a PC in front of you right now or so, and back in the day it was like rooms. You go into a room.
My crew's this big. It's this tiny little thing over there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely we just keep on evolving and we just keep on getting better, and that has always been the nature of humans over time.
Yeah, for sure. And especially the Nubians are definitely part of human civilization. I'm definitely glad to have met you guys and have you on. I mean, anything I could do to help you with your history. I guess I started to remember some of my Nubian history from when we did those episodes. It was quite a while ago. But yes, if you want to check them out, you could. I have an episode. If you look, I'll put a link in my show notes to our podcast that I did. We did some episodes. There's some episodes in there on the Siege of Jerusalem where you guys could check it out, where you learn about Taharka and that kind of thing.
Definitely. We would more than love to check it out. If you
share with you
send
people.
us the links, I will. Then we'll definitely check it out there. That would be amazing.
Will. Yeah, so if you guys want to add anything else, just, let me know. Anything else you want to tell us?
I think that's it for today. We had definitely a great time with you, Bernie, and it was amazing to be with you on board.
Yeah, thank you. So do you guys have any social media, Facebook or any of that stuff? I'll put it in my show notes, but if you want to say, do you have a Facebook page or a Instagrams or any of that kind of thing?
Yeah, we do have an Instagram page. It's called Nubin. Okay. You guys can check it out below. It's _Nubin. And we also have our website, www.nubin.com. Make sure to tune in and check us out over there.
And that's Nubin, Nubiin, 2 I's.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. And if you haven't listened on your guys' channel, our podcast is called Creative History. But this is about you, so... Thank you for being on the show, and thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure having this chat with you, and it's great knowing you as well.